Good morning. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing for June 30th, 2020. We will start with the first case, RPC number 01-034-011, 2709 North Somerset Street. Mr. Daniel Sullivan is the homeowner, and he can start with his 8 minutes and tell us about the case.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks to all of you. It's nice to meet you. I live at this home with my wife and children, and I'm just coming at this from the perspective of a homeowner who thinks that like cases should be treated alike. And so I'd like to address three things. One is the fair market value issue. I don't think my home has been valued in comparison with the fair market value of homes in the area. The appraisers have listed 3 homes of comparable sales. I should step back and mention, in my neighborhood, the homes are generally cookie cutter, built in 1951. The only modifications are if maybe people add a small addition, things of that sort. So it's pretty easy to get comparables. So 2 of these sales were for $760. One was for $825. The $760 is well below what my home was originally assessed at, which was $827. After I appealed, it got lowered to $814. But $760 is what the market is saying a comparable home is in my neighborhood. That $825 home, similar setup to mine, but is an example of a home where changes and additions have been made. There is a sunroom, which is enclosed and used as a full room. Comparison to my home, I have a sunroom, but it's not winterized. It doesn't have an air conditioner. It was essentially a screened-in porch that somebody put some slabs of window slabs on. Whereas this 825 home has a full sunroom that's fully enclosed and usable, and they added an addition above it, so a bump out above it. That doesn't exist in my home. That doesn't exist in these 2 homes at 760. So that's on the comparable sales. I think my home is being overvalued. Then second, on comparable assessments, in my appeal, I included a number of assessments, but I'll just focus on the one that the appraisers focused on, which is a home right around the block from mine, which sold for $830 in 2017, and is appraised, however, at $808. So just as an initial matter, I find it strange that my home, which sold for $775 5 years ago, is being appraised higher than a home that sold for $830 only 3 years ago. The other issue is that this home is again an example of one of these cookie cutter homes that though had changes made to it. So similar situation, they made changes to their sunroom. It's a bumped out sunroom, fully usable. I've been in the home when it was on the market. And they've got a finished basement like mine. They've got a new kitchen, all of those things. So just in terms of the comparable that's being used, it's comparable, but it's actually a nicer and bigger home than mine is. And so I think like cases are not being treated alike. I'm not an expert on assessments, and just in reviewing the materials beforehand, I'm noticing that the assessors use something called an EA, an effective age. And I think that is the cause of my woes, because I look at all these comparable homes. The EA they were using for my home before I protested was 1985. For all these comparables, it's 1961, 1971, 1965, 1966. In response to my protest, my home got lowered to 1975, but that's still way above, above all of these other ones that I'm being compared to. And I've submitted photos for all of these homes, except for the home that went for $825. I didn't know that was being listed as comparable until I got the response, which I received after my appeal was filed. And I don't have photos of the inside of that home, but somebody thought it was worth $825, so it can't be a dump. And so I think the issue, just from a assessment point of view, is that mine, because I know this is done off a calculator and all that stuff. My EA is out of line with the other EAs in the neighborhood. And so I think that's the root cause of the issue. But if you just run the numbers, if you take the 3 comparable home sales that they listed, the median price is $760. So I'm being way above that. But if we want to take into account the home for $825, the average price would have been $782. So again, my assessment is way above that. And then if we want to look at the assessment values, not just the price values, if you take the average of all four that they're looking at, that comes out to 804. So, to price me originally at 827 and then just to bump me down to 814, I don't think is equitable. And I would say this is a culmination of, a number of years of bump ups in the assessment value. And I may have been asleep at the switch and not realizing this, but I just think, in my neighborhood, there are very comparable homes and mine is being priced out of whack. And in fact, I'm being, priced lower in this one case of a house that is a nicer house, a bigger house than mine, and that's sold for considerably more. So I'll leave it at that. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, but thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Yabar, I believe you're on the call.
Yes.
There you go. All right, thank you.
Okay. Hi, good morning, members of the board. Mr. Sullivan, good morning. Today I will explain the 2020 evaluation for the property at 2709 North Somerset Street. The house was built in 1951. It's a two-story brick with a finished basement. It's well maintained, in a good condition. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms. The house was purchased in 2015 for $75,000, and the subject property also was inspected in 2019 due to a previous assessment review last year. The sketch and the exterior measurements were all confirmed. No change has been made based on in the previous review in 2019. As per the interior review or interior inspection, was noticeable to us that the basement was upgraded compared to older basements of similar houses in that neighborhood. The renovation of the basement was made in 2005. A new bathroom was installed in 2011 in the basement, which actually has contributed to the increase on the effective age of the property based on these renovations in 2005 and 2011. Yes, we have looked at the properties that Mr. Sullivan mentioned, the ones that were sold for $760,000, which I will explain. The first one is the comp number 1, 6548 27th Street North, built in 1951, sold for $760,000 in June of 2019. It has a similar interior, also a finished basement with a bathroom, but the interior renovations are not as newer or recent compared to the subject. Home number 1 is on the corner of North Trinidad Street and 27th Street. We consider that the location of the properties of Mr. Sullivan is superior because it's in a more quiet section of the street. It's not right on the intersection with North Trinidad, which can be a little more traffic or a little more loud on that section of the street. Comp number 3 also is a similar house built in 1951, sold for $760,000 in 2018. Similar footprint to the subject. Basement is only partially finished with wood paneling, no bathroom. Also, this house is the second from the corner with North Trinidad Street. Again, the subject is in a much more quiet section of the street, not as close to North Trinidad like the 2 properties that sold for $760,000. The side porch of this house is almost identical condition than Mr. Sullivan's house. It's just a side porch, is no considered part of the livable space of the house, and doesn't add to the total livable space of the house. We consider that the subject actually has more recent renovations in the basement and also has an additional bathroom in the basement. That we consider that the subject is superior to this house also. After the owner's request to review the assessment of the property, we decide to make a revision from the original $827,000 down to $814,000. This also represents a 1.31% increase compared to 2019. In the average for the neighborhood is actually 3.09%. So So it's basically lower than the average for the neighborhood. So based on all the property description, the previous inspection, and the review of the assessment, we recommend to revise the assessment value to $840,000 for 2020. That's a recommendation of the department to the board.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
Excuse me, I have a question for the department. On comp 1, is their porch finished, and that's why the finished area square footage is higher than the appellant's and comp 3? Or is the house just bigger?
No, and if you're referring to comp number 1 or comp number 3?
1.
Well, these houses are almost identical. The difference with the subject, Mr. Sullivan's house, is that the basement is almost completely finished. That's why the finished area in the basement is 571. The finish is much extensive compared to the other properties. The area.
But the main home, you see it's 1,300 plus versus 1,500 plus. Why is that different?
Yeah, so again, some of these houses have, most of these houses have a porch on the side, small brick porch. Some of them actually have refinished that area, and we are counting that additional square footage into the total finished area of the house. That's the difference between the square footage of the property.
Okay, so the appellant's porch is not considered finished square footage because it's not four season. Okay.
Actually, yes. Actually, in 2019, when I went to the house with Mr. Sullivan, he pointed out that to me, and I removed that area of the porch from his assessment. I changed that in 2019.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Mr. Penaranda. I can't hear you. No.
I'm not sure
There you
why.
go. You're on.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, it sounds like the main difference is the basement that is making the effective age higher than the rest. But yeah, looking at the pictures of the comparables that were provided, and I looked on MRIS also, the similarities are there. Some of the homes also have the old tiles, like Mr. Sullivan, the green, pink, or yellow tiles. I know. So, is it just the basement that is making the difference in the effective age?
Yes, also the renovations were done more recently. The bathroom was installed in 2011, and definitely is a much newer improvement to the house. So I actually decided to make a correction to the effective age and lower that to 1975, even though the house was built in 1951. But I feel comfortable with that effective age as is today after reviewing the assessment. I don't feel like I should lower that much more. And this house has been renovated, has been upgraded recently. It won't be fair for the other properties that haven't actually inspected in the interior to make a much larger correction. That's my fair assessment. That's all I can do at this point. After the inspection.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, why do you think we've got two sales that are significantly below the assessed value, comp 1 and comp 3, and they're pretty recent? So
Yes.
what was going on there? Are they non-arm's length transaction? Is this a tear down? What do you think is happening there?
Well, yes, that's something that is noticeable, that the sales price actually lower compared to the other ones. One of the things that we might need to actually study or make a much deeper research is the location of these properties. These properties are, one of them is in the corner of North Trinidad Street, and the other one is the second from the corner of North Trinidad Street. Might be an actual outside influence for being located that close to that street, and also being close to the high school that is on North Trinidad. That might be an outside influence and negative adjustment that need to be included to those properties on that section of North Trinidad. That's something that we might need to research more, and it has been brought up by the review for Mr. Sullivan.
Okay, do we give any, is there any difference between a corner lot or an inline lot?
No, I mean, as of today, all these properties have been valued the same. There is no adjustments. Again, we might need to make more research and see exactly if it's something that is an external factor bringing those values down. But in 2019, when I did the review for Mr. Sullivan, also, we have sales that are above $800,000. We have we support the assessment last year, showing that there were sales for $830,000, $850,000, and $900,000 in the same neighborhood, in the same location that as Mr. Sullivan. So the prices are, the sales prices are supporting the current assessment.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Yates, I can't see you. For some reason, Mr. Brinley's camera is on and he's taken your spot on the screen. Do you have any questions?
No, more comments later.
Okay. All right. Well, with no further questions, Mr. Ybarra, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes. So again, after reviewing Mr. Sullivan's assessment for 2020, was recommended by to revise the assessment from 820,000 to down to 814,000, and that will be our recommendation for the assessment on year 2020. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sullivan, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure, thank you. Just to address a few of your questions, those two houses for $760, they're not tear downs, they're being used. The house that sold for $825 is also on the corner on North Trinidad Street, directly across from the high school. So somebody's willing to pay $825 for that location. One thing Mr. Ybarra did not talk about was comparable number 4, the home that's around the block from me that is not near North Trinidad Street and that has that is priced less than mine, but sold for $830, and if you look at the pictures of the basement, fully finished basement, nice bathroom, nice kitchen. So and it has that bump out of the sunroom. So the notion that the improvements that were made to my house before I moved there make me out of line with the other comparables. I think if you look at 4, that's definitely not the case, and that's actually a nicer house than mine. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. The first reaction I had with this case is where, we're looking at fair market value, we're looking at what a house would sell for, and normally the assessment is either there or below. So my reaction first was, we're looking at 2 good comparables that I would use if I was doing a market analysis to value a property with a sale of $760. Now, I understand the effective age is making a big difference in this case, but I think it's a bit high.
Okay, Mr. Matzkin. Turn your microphone on. Ken.
Trying to be polite and not squeak in front of people, even though I have a squeakless chair. Thank you. What I was focusing on the entire time was the effective age. Sure, it's a little more modern than the comparables, but the comparables and the subject's house are not modern effective ages. And the difference between an effective age, as an example, 2015 versus 2005, is much bigger difference to me than 1975 and 1965. And so I'm sympathetic that that shouldn't be taken in such significant account. As an example, between it and comparable one, the $20,000 or so difference. And I was edging in my mind, and I'll just put it out now, to return the assessed value, all in the improvement, of course, to the 2019 level, because I just don't feel compelling 1975 is such a compelling effective age that it should be the improvement should be demonstrably higher than otherwise very, very similar homes. So I put that out there for rumination.
Okay, Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I'm with you, Ken, and I think it puts it kind of in the right spot between comps 1 and 3 and comp 4. I think it's definitely not as nice a house as comp 4. When you look at comp 4, it's a bigger lot. He's got the finished basement and the enclosed sunroom, which you mentioned, and the assessment's 808,600. So I think you need to be, for equalization purposes, you need to be below that, probably by the value of maybe enclosing the sunroom, which would be about $5,000, and that puts you right at 2019.
Mr. Lawson.
I agree it should be lowered, and what I focused on, excuse me, was, this has more finished basement space, but to me, that's of less value, and it's just not as accommodating, I don't think, as general finished area. And comp 3 is the same with finished area, but comps 1 and 2 have significantly more. And so I would go with the suggestion to go with 2019.
I'm sorry, I just have a comment and a question. To your point, Mr. Lawson, about the basement being lesser value, I think that's built into the system, that anything below grade is assessed at a less value. So I think that's covered. My concern is, I think, Mr. Yates, you suggested to go back to the value of 2019. Are you talking the whole value? Because that puts it back at 171.4 for the building, and the land did in fact go up.
I believe that was Ken.
I'm sorry. Can't hear you.
I'm getting too good at this. My idea was, no, the land's the land. I'm 100% happy. But I was just thinking the overall assessment of 803, 500, and taking it directly out of the improvement. That was my notion. But because of course the improvement is the same 2019 and 2020. So I would reduce.
Not by the revised, it's not. They reduced it.
Oh, 158, yeah, that's right, which is here, of course, yeah. Well, I wouldn't touch the land, not ever. It was the overall assessment I was looking at. And so having said that, so that brings the, because this is a great question, so thank you. Brings it down 11,147, which is still higher than comps 1 and 3. Yeah, I feel comfortable.
Wait, I'm sorry. Do your math for me. Because if the land is 655.6, what are you proposing to put the building? Because the building in 19 was 171. That brings it back up to 827.
Yes, no, I was looking at starting with 814, 2020, and 158, the improvement for 2020, and getting the 814 down to 8035. And so taking 10,500 off of the improvement, making it 147.9, which again is higher than comps 1 and 3, which are the best comps.
how do you see it compared to a couple of the actual neighbors on that street? They seem to be very parallel. And I've walked by that house quite often. I think it'd sell for that price.
I think it would too. I mean, I look at this and I agree with the statement that 1975 to 1965 or 66, that's all basically the same effective age to me. And this house, would sell for 814. I don't see where it's over assessed.
Yeah.
But very similar houses went for only 760 in the assessment period. So how can you based on what do you make the leap for this one to be 50,000 more, 55,000 more?
Well, that's a very good question. And why they sold for that? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, I don't either.
But I for sure want to key the assessment off these comparables assessments, not their sales. The department, I'm sure, software accounted why this is over 100%, and I'm comfortable with that.
right, with the assessments, I mean, I think it's not in line with the two sale prices, I'll give you that. But I mean, with the assessment and when you compare it with the finished basement, especially on comp 4, I don't know.
The appellant did give a good argument on the change in the price from his purchase compared to the purchases of some of the others and how it escalated more. But I'm not sure what to do with that because I don't see them being that far off today.
Right. From assessed values.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't either, so.
I know it's not a big difference on the assessment itself, but I agree with Ken. I think either we, that's a good number to pick to, I guess to just make an adjustment. What I was doing is I was looking at comparable number 1. That is assessed at 796.8, and to me, honestly, looking at the pictures, they look similar, the same, same type of quality. Whether the basement on that one is a little bit newer or not, like we said, I don't think it makes that much of a difference on the effective age. And I also looked at comparable number 4, assessed at 808,600. If we just take the difference in the land, because it's a little bit bigger, that's 11,700. I reduce it from the 814. No, I'm sorry. If we reduce that difference from comparable number 4, I come up with another number of 796,900, which to me is a little bit more in line than, as far as assessment than just the sale prices. I think the sale prices are a good way to work with, but looking at the assessments, I would feel more comfortable going with something that at least I can justify rather than just pick.
Hear that?
Still in agreement with that?
I'm hearing a lot of feedback here, so I can't.
Your mic. Better.
Okay,
Yeah, that's good.
people agree with that?
I didn't. Can you repeat the last part, Jose? You're breaking up. You got to turn your mic on.
Put your mic on.
I'm pretty much looking at comparable number 1 and comparable number 4. Like the number 796, 900. terms of the land value in terms of reducing it. But also couple number one, I think it's all about
Computer for the audio or something, because that mic is just crackling up like crazy.
Okay, I believe, Jose, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you said based on the comps 1 and 4, you came up with a value of 796.9, and you
Right.
thought that was more in line?
Right.
Okay. Mr. Yates, you have your hand up. Did you have a question? Okay.
No, I was just saying that's important.
Okay, so Jose, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I move that we reduce the assessment to 796,900 based on comparable number 1 and comparable number 4.
Shut your mic off. Jose, thank you. Okay, Mr. Penaranda made a motion to reduce the assessment to 796,900 based on the assessments of Comp 1 and Comp 4. I have a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Greg Hoffman. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay, so it is a 5-2. The assessment is reduced to 796,900 for the 2020 year. Okay, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Okay, do we have Mr. Brindley?
Yes, he's here.
Okay. All right, we will move to the next case, which is RPC 14020-113, 1050 North Taylor Street. Mr. Brindley, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about your property.
This is a small apartment in the Windsor Plaza complex. It shows 22 years of wear and tear. There haven't been any improvements. If you cycle through the photographs I submitted, living room, kitchen, dining area, bathroom, bedroom, and so forth, you'll see that carpeting throughout the apartment is as it was in June 1998 when we purchased it. The stove is the same stove that was in the apartment. The only appliances that have been changed are ones that are replacements. They're not upgrades. These are for original appliances that had to be replaced. So it's essentially the same kitchen that I walked into in June of 1998, with the exception of the upgraded granite countertops. The cabinets are original. The floor is original, as is the tile floor in the foyer. The bathroom in that picture, that's the same bathroom when we bought the place, with the exception of replacing the toilet back in 2010. The exterior window screens are all the same. I don't have an exterior shot of that, but they are the same and deteriorating to some extent. So as I said, there's been no improvements in this apartment. And the two comparable units that I submitted are both the same size area as mine, which is the 637 to 670 square feet, and I'm sort of in the middle of that at 644 square feet. They both have terraces, and both of them have had wooden floors, tile floors replaced, upgrades to the kitchen to stainless steel, and they're described in the documents that I submitted. They've had bathrooms upgraded, and you can see from the pictures particularly of a comp 2, the living room, but particularly the kitchen area and so forth, which has been totally redone and so forth. And they're both of those are assessed considerably lower in mine. Comp number 1 is at 372.7, and comp number 2, which is the same unit but in the Utah side of our 2-building complex, is assessed at 375.5, and they both sold considerably above that, reflecting their improvements. The large terrace, which you see in the department's presentation from my unit, does not have the views that it had in 1988 because of construction of the high school, the Washington Liberty High School, and construction of high-rises in Rosalind, which have essentially blocked out the July 4th view, which is coming out, and among any other views of Washington or DC proper. And the the contrast between the two comparables that I submitted, the first of which sold for $380,000 and the second one sold for $435,000, reflect improved apartments of this kind in the complex. And I just asked the board to really consider looking at the photographs of my apartment if you really think that that's worth $400,000 on the market in January of this year.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Carvajal, tell us about the property.
Sure. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. The subject is Unit 712, located at the Windsor Plaza condo. Windsor Plaza condo is comprised of 184 units split amongst 2 separate buildings in Ballston. The subject is located on the 7th floor and has 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and 644 square feet of living area. It is close to its original condition with minor updates to appliances and countertops in the kitchen. The 2020 sales analysis showed us that 94% of the valid open market transactions that occurred at Windsor Plaza condo had sale prices that were higher than their unit's current assessment. This trend has been repeated for several years now, and when we bump up assessments to reflect market value, but then the following year, market value for these units increase again, and we've been playing catch up, so to speak. In 2019, all 184 units saw a 3% increase, and in 2020, all units saw a 5% increase. Even after the 5% increase, the median assessment still only reached 96% of market value in this building. Although built in the mid-1990s, the original build quality was high and the units have not aged much. We do see some units that have been fully renovated, but for the most part, what we typically see are updated flooring, bathroom fixtures, and kitchen appliances. We do on occasion see units that sell that are close to their original condition. A couple of these were reviewed in the memo to the BOE. I wanted to talk a little bit about the terrace that the appellant mentioned in his write-up to the BOE. Adjustments such as tier, floor, parking, balconies, etc., are reviewed every year to make sure that our current values are accurate. When a unit sells that has characteristics that have value, we review these during the analysis. If a characteristic's value is incorrect, we will usually see that their assessment to sale price ratio comes in higher than those that don't have these characteristics. When we see this, we find out which units are being affected, correct the value, and make the appropriate changes. The subject currently has an adjustment of $20,000 that is given to the large 400 square foot terrace, not for the view that you have from it. So the $20,000 adjustment is for the terrace, not the view. This terrace is for the private use of the homeowner and is not shared. 16 other units have a similar terrace and receive the same adjustment. Past sales have shown that the market value on these terraces have not changed in the past couple of years. But in fact, our department determined in 2009 that the terraces were not as desirable as they once were, and their assessed value was reduced from $40,000 to $20,000 in 2009. A unit that has one of these terraces sold during the analysis period, and like most sales in this complex, the sales price was higher than the assessed value, even after the 5% increase for 2020. On page 4 of 5 of the BOE packet, you can find the comp sheet that was submitted with this case. Comps 1 and 2 were selected because they are units that, when sold, had levels of renovation similar to the subject, demonstrating close to original condition market value. Comp 3 was used to demonstrate the market value of the smallest unit in the building located on the first floor, which happened to have sold this year. Comp 4, although not used in the 2020 analysis, was used in the 2019 analysis and is provided as a comp to again demonstrate market value for a unit that is still in its original 1990s condition. After reviewing the analysis and taking into consideration the subject's current level of remodel and floor adjustments, it is the department's recommendation to confirm the 2020 assessment at $396,500, which can be confirmed as fair and equitable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members, please.
Yeah, I'll start. Mr. Carvajal, I have in your write-up, you mentioned that there's a view adjustment of 20,000, but now you're saying that there is no view adjustment in any of them? Because the data card also shows a view adjustment of 20,000.
Right. I'd like to make a clarification. In our system, the way this building was set up originally, there's no option in our system to have a terrace value. Some units have patio values, but whoever set this building up when it was constructed in our department said these are not patios, these are terraces, and the way they were set up in our system, they were categorized as a view adjustment because we just don't have a terrace adjustment. The $20,000 value is for the terrace, it's not for the view. There are 16 units that have this terrace. The highest one is on the 7th floor. The lowest one is on the 4th floor. The ones that are on the 4th floor are looking at the townhomes across the street or into trees. They don't have a view, but they still have that $20,000 adjustment for the terrace.
Okay. And also, I wanted to see, I'm looking at the comparable number 1, unit 303, which is assessed right now 373,300. And I also looked at one unit that sold, which was 603, which I guess it's in the same tier. It's the same size. It's assessed for only $3,000 more. Is there a floor adjustment of $1,000, or what's the difference between? Your microphone is off.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, we do have floor adjustments in this building. I believe they start on the 4th floor. 4th floor has an adjustment of 1,000. 5th is 2,000. 6th is 3,000, and the 7th floor has a floor adjustment of 4,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions from board members? No? Okay, Mr. Carvajal, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
The department has nothing new to add. I just ask that the department or the board, in their consideration of value, please take a look at the comps that we submitted. What we wanted to point out in the comp sheet was what market value was for units that are still close to their original condition. If you want to see all the sales that were available, we also supplied the analysis sheet, which shows original condition units as well as fully renovated units, but they all have the same trend, which is that overall they're all underassessed at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brindley, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, I read the department's analysis and so forth, but what I want the board to concentrate on is the condition of my apartment, 712, versus the renovated apartments that are in the same size as mine and both have terraces, which, you know, their system may call a patio, but they're around 120, 150 square feet each, so they're not small. And look at the condition that those two apartments are in, and they sold recently, and one's over 400,000, the other's at 380. And do you really believe that my apartment, in the condition it is in right now, is worth $400,000 on the market? Would you pay $400,000 for my apartment when you could have bought the Utah unit, you know, for a little more than 400,000, or the other Taylor unit that I submitted for $380,000? I think rationally, no, you wouldn't. You wouldn't pay $400,000 for my apartment, even with that terrace in the condition it is in, when you could get a renovated apartment for a lot less, or for that $400,000.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, it's now just among board members, please. What does everybody think? Mr. Lawson. Turn your microphone on.
I think I have it on now. Can you all
Okay.
hear? I'd be curious if Greg has a comment. On a square foot basis, I was looking at the living area of this unit and then the others, and I only looked at North Taylor, but his on a square foot basis is 615. Comp 1 is 494, Comp 2 is 462, and then Comp 4 is 519. And I'd be curious what Greg thinks, since he builds new condos.
Mr. Hoffman, do you want to respond to that?
I don't think it's that far out of whack. I mean,
No.
there's a difference, but if you got to pull out that 20,000 on the terrace, and that brings the square foot down a little bit closer.
Yeah, I would agree with Greg. I mean, I look at the comps, I think the comps support the assessment. I mean, in answer to the question from the appellant, you know, would you pay this in the current condition? I mean, there's obviously deferred maintenance. I don't want to speak for a realtor, but I think if a realtor went in there, you would say, pick up the trash bags, you know, get rid of the clutter. The square footage and just the location alone, I don't see where 396.5 is an overassessment. Mr. Matzkin, turn your microphone on, please. Still not on.
I know, I'm
There you
sorry. I keep it up so that I can see it, and I still don't see it. The key to me is the terrace for this building. That's unusual, and that's got to be real exciting to people. I wanted to lower this, but after the height adjustment, the terrace adjustment, it does seem in line to me. Again, after stewing on it, that this seems high based on some comps I saw, not only on the sheet, but also in the MLS system. But after hearing both sides, I got to go with the department.
Okay, Mr. Lawson, if you turn on your microphone, please.
Hey, Ken, this is Barnes, and your comment made me think of a question, but I can't ask it to either the applicant or the county. Is that terrace private? Is
Yes.
it only for his use? Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions or concerns, comments?
No, I agree. I think the main difference is that $20,000 increment. I thought it was for the views, because I went by and I looked at some of the other units, and yeah, the views can be, can vary, but if it's for the terrace and it's only for the use of that unit, then other units are getting the same, so I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I think the appellant even said that given the value of the other units that have been renovated, he's discounting the terrace completely, and I don't think that's correct. I think, yeah, as a trade-off, if you take in the renovation numbers a little bit and discount the terrace, he would be in line with the other units that he's using as his own comps. That terrace has value.
All right, with that being said, then I will move to confirm the county. Do a second?
I'll
Second,
Okay.
whoever.
Mark Yates is a second. All in favor to confirm the county? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's confirmed at 396,500 for 2020.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Mark Yates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brindley. Okay, is Mr. Viola on the call? I see him.
Yes.
Okay.
He's here.
There was a request, we'll take a little break before we do the three cases, but there was a request and there's some confusion over hearing the cases and a request to postpone. It's been the practice of the board that if there's certainly good notice to do it and we could replace it, we would do it, but historically we have not done that. Is the board in agreement with that we'll hear the cases? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we will hear these cases. Mr. Lawson is not going to be present because he didn't read the cases. So he can go ahead and sign off. But then we'll take a 5-minute break. It's 9:51. We'll come back at 9:56 and we will hear these three cases. Mr. Lawson.
Yes, thank you. I would like to also share, I have a long relationship with Mr. Viola, and I did misunderstand, and so I didn't review them. But I also feel, based on that lengthy relationship, maybe it'd be better if I didn't weigh in on these anyway. So I wanted to share that. Thank you.
Okay. It's not an option at this point anyway, so that's mute. Okay, so we will take 5 minutes and everybody be back here. Right now it's at 9:57.
All right.
Okay?
Yes.
Who do we have speaking for Mr. Viola?
So we have Diane Waters, David DeCamp, and also Mr. Viola himself in the
Okay,
flesh.
so everybody's on here.
Yep, everyone's here.
Okay, so give me the names again, I'm sorry.
Diane Waters,
Uh-huh.
David DeCamp,
Yes.
and Andrew Viola.
Okay, perfect. Okay, before we call the case, I just want to remind all the board members, this is streaming live. There are other people on the call and other people who will hear this. So please don't use actual numbers in any of the discussions or questions. You have to refer to page numbers and line numbers. So is everybody okay? Okay. That being said, we'll move to case 3 on the agenda, RPC 18014-331 at 1220 North Fillmore, Suite 200.
All right, so we started with 331. Okay.
Ms. Waters, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property.
Sure. So this RPC, this is in the Station Square condominium in Arlington. It is a building built by a developer, and there is approximately 60,000 square feet still owned, contiguous square feet, owned and operated by the developer and leased to third parties. This particular RPC, this space is about 15,000 square feet, and in conjunction with the other RPC 332, both of these spaces are leased to a gym use. I want to take a few minutes to just talk about the market real quick, because one of the things in our argument is about cap rate. And to remind people, even pre-COVID, this Clarendon Courthouse market had about 6.3 million square feet of office space at an average rent of $40 a square foot and a vacancy rate of 14%. And also in competing areas, there's another 800,000 square feet of vacant space, and then the 4 million square feet of vacant space in the Boston-Roslyn markets. I know we're probably one of the first commercial hearings that you guys are having. I also wanted to point out that in 2019, the sales price average on the 3 transactions that occurred was $344 a square foot. And there was one cap rate that was disclosed at 6.25, actually 2500 Wilson. And this building actually is over 100,000 square feet, has an atrium, has a conferencing facility, has a property manager on site, has a restaurant, and has shower facilities. In our particular case, we have the front retail space of the building, and then we have one floor of office, which we'll hear in a case later on, and another second floor of office space. This space that is leased to the gym tenant, the cap rate that the county is using is an effective unloaded rate of 5.2%. 5.2% for a tenant whose credit, as I disclosed in my write-up, is really shaky within this market, even pre-COVID. I cited an actual write-up by a third party about how many locations they had closed and consolidated. We spoke about the transaction that we had been asked to do, where we're no longer getting corporate guarantee. And subsequently, we all know what's happened subsequently, and that will be for next year. But I think my insight was quite on point, given their reactions to current events and trying to get out of the leases with landlords. Let's see. I do want to point out in the appraiser's comments for this that there are several corrections that need to be made. So I'm referring to the memorandum to the board. Station Square, I just want to point out that it's residential condo mainly. There is office and retail space, as the appraiser indicates. I also wanted to clarify that the parking areas are not part of the condo association. The parking area is a separate RPC and is operated by Colonial, and all tenants, office, residential, or commercial, have to pay for parking. and parking is $11 an hour, $11 for the day. So parking is not included in just being a tenant here. They also, let's see what else. The size, we talked about the size being contiguous. And I also want to clarify that the two RPCs together in the write-up, the appraiser indicates that we're claiming a value, and that's incorrect. The value that we're claiming is the 6.2 plus the 1.3 for a total of 7.5. RPC 331 is a larger space at 6.2. We're claiming a cap rate of 8%. I also want to point out that in the Ine Summary provided and the appraiser's write-up, it's misleading on the column G2 on the appellant's pro forma. That square footage uses the larger square footage, the per square foot number of 356 uses the larger square footage, and the comp to compare it to the real estate's office 523 is more like a 400 per square foot. So yeah, so this is part of a larger contiguous. The space, if it was redone, would more likely be office than its current use. There'd be a huge amount of TIs involved. And I know that they have it classified right now as commercial general. And I also wanted to point out that in reviewing the 2020 commercial guidelines in the booklet provided by the real estate office, the capitalization rates used are loaded with the tax rate, as I'm sure everyone knows. So they're putting it down, they're assessing properties in Arlington for a 5.2% cap rate for space that's, that blows my mind a little bit. I haven't seen a 5.2 cap rate in any transaction in the last few years. And all of the reports that they use, they list on page 10 the publication used and the 2020 general commercial guidelines. The RERC report does not contain small office or condominium information. It only has central business district and suburban office rates. The PwC investor survey specifically stated that no one would be interested in non-institutional grade buildings. And this particular complex, this space, would not be considered institutional. It is not large enough. And they actually cite cap rates of 4.5 to 8.5%. And somehow we end up with a 5.2 here. And 70% of them considered it a buyer's market. And the other 30% said it was just neutral. The PricewaterhouseCoopers has no office information at all. And then if we look over at the other guidelines that they use for office, they cite the same reports except for a JLL office cost benchmarking report, and that really only states to regarding the cost of the build out. And with less than 1 minute left, Mr. DeCamp, do you have anything to say on this one?
No, you covered it very well. Thank you.
Mr. Viola?
The only thing I will say is the parking is not.
You're good. Someone has space.
Okay. Well, no, anyway, I was just going to say the residential parking is not part of the parking garage. There are 561 spaces. We have 190. The remainder were sold to the residents in conveying the condominiums to them. So they're in their back.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roskin.
Good morning, board. Good morning, appellants. My name is Lori Roskin, and I am a commercial appraiser with Arlington County. To start off with, first of all, just gave a brief description that this is Station Square commercial condominium, and it's comprised of, yes, it is mixed use with residential, multiple stories high, and on the 3 floors, it's primarily restaurant, retail, and office. And the subject is located in Building A. There are multiple buildings in Station Square. So First of all, I just want to remind the board that when we're valuing these properties, we're basing it on January 1, 2020. Also, when we look at the general commercial guidelines, the guidelines for commercial condominiums are based on sales and income and expense statements solely pertaining to commercial condominiums. They do not include the large office buildings. They don't include small office or other freestanding retail or restaurant or so on and so forth. It's strictly, we're analyzing just commercial condominium properties together. And we did base our cap rate, which is loaded at 6.25%. And that's based on the sales that have occurred in the county of other commercial condominiums. For the subject, I just want you to refer to page 4. And we're using the net leasable area of 15,558 square feet. If you notice that in column D, it is square footage that is recorded in the declaration. So we must use that net leasable area. As for this particular RPC ending in 331, we looked at also, there was a sale that had occurred last year within Station Square. The RPC is 18-014-334, and it sold for $3,650,000. The assessment ratio is 88%. That this had occurred October 2019. When we valued all the commercial units within Station Square, we applied the same rental rate, stabilized vacancy, expenses, and cap rate across all the units to equalize. And that's pretty much what I have to say, unless my supervisor wants to add anything else.
Okay, no other comments?
No,
okay.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from the board, please.
Oh, I did have a rebuttal.
You'll get a chance after the questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Metzgen. Turn your microphone on, please.
A lot of this has to do with the cap rate, and I've heard several of them from the appellant and the department, but I didn't hear the one, I guess this is a question for the department. I didn't hear the one that is on page 9 of the guidelines, which is for general commercial and condominium, which is 7%. I heard 5.2, I heard 6.2, heard it's loaded, it's unloaded. Tell me, the department, it's since your guidelines, page 9 towards the bottom, general commercial properties, excluding commercial condos. So where's the 6.2 then? Please bring me up to speed, department. Where's the 6.2 for general commercial and commercial condos in the guidelines?
Okay, are you asking me to show you on the page on the guidelines?
Yes, ma'am. What page is it?
It's on page 9. Okay, and if you look about midway, where it mentions capitalization rates for general commercial properties, it's a grid, and you'll see 7%, and then you'll see 6.25 repeated 3 times.
Yes.
Okay, look over to the left where it says commercial condominiums, excluding north and south medical. The cap rate is 6.25.
Okay, and which is what you have in the INE. I heard 6.2 and it just threw me off. I didn't see that anywhere. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question for the appellant. Ms. Waters, when I look at page 4, the INE statement, and I'm going to try and do this slowly so I don't say numbers out loud, but when I look at the historical information of the NOI on line 21 for column A, B, and C for 2016, 17, and 18, when I look at the number that you got, I mean, obviously, I think the county was low in the assessment based on getting column E's numbers. But how do you justify your number when I do basic math with the 6.2 million that you're using in an 8% cap rate to justify that that would be the NOI on this property?
Because I'm using the actual NOI, and the county has actually loaded their income number with real estate tax reimbursement.
They're counting it in the.
Yeah, I'm not following.
They're counting the reimbursement of the actual real estate taxes within the revenue. So the NOI that they're using includes that, and I'm using actual NOI that we have. This is a space that's leased to a single tenant. This is not operated as a condominium. This is operated as an office, and that's kind of one of our key points here. This isn't like a 3 or a 5 or a 6,000 square foot condominium that's operated and owner operated like on the 4th floor. This is 60,000 square feet. This is a piece of 60,000 square feet that a developer built and a developer leases out. It is financed altogether. There's 2 spaces here, 331 and 332. And if the board wants, I think we can table it and look at 332, because I think these 2 need to be looked in conjunction. And I will actually point out that the BOE memo for 331 is missing our entire BOE application, if you look at that. And I brought that to Mrs. Torres's attention as soon as the memo was produced. And I was told that nothing could be done of it.
Okay, well, we'll get to that when we get to that case.
This is this case. If you look through this, the BOE application is not part of the memo. The actual BOE application that I walked down and handed with 3 others is not part of this BOE memo.
Right, but that was what was sent out to us yesterday afternoon.
Okay, so you did receive it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But I guess where I'm confused in, though, looking at this, you've got, historically, we've always had income coming from it, factor in vacancy, and then do the expenses, and you come up with the NOI for the 3 previous years.
Yeah, and I don't think we have any argument on NOI. Our simple argument is cap rate and classification of the asset. The asset is leased and should be more considered as a small office or office because it's 2nd floor space.
Okay.
It does have
You can say that when you finish.
Sure.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, the department mentioned another sale in the building or in the complex. I didn't have it in the packet, but it was RPC 18015-334. Just wondering if there was any information on that sale. Is this a retail condo in the same complex?
It's above us on the 4th floor.
This is for the department.
Excuse me.
For the department. Sorry.
Yeah, and what the square footage? Just give us some background on that.
Okay, my apologies, but I'll have to pull up a different program. If you could give me just a moment, I can pull that up because it just crashed.
Hey, Greg, I got the answer for you. Me and Lori was actually talking about this sale earlier. So the sale is for a space that is 6,678 square feet. In this complex, the price per square foot was $546.57. And as she stated, the assessment to sales ratio was 88%.
And was that office space or retail?
Yes, it's office.
Okay. All right, thanks. That's all I was looking for.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin.
A question for the department. I'm talking, the appellant is said many times that the cap rate is loaded with the real estate taxes and Let me ask the appellant first. So I guess I have two questions. For the appellant, and I should know this, but jargon is used differently by different people.
Sure.
How does the real estate taxes, because they do take it out as pass-throughs to deduce the EGI, the effective gross income, through pass-throughs, and how does the loading of real estate taxes make the cap rate go from 5.2 to 6.2, your contention being that it's really effectively therefore 5.2, which is a very, very low cap rate these days?
Yeah, so the way that the department does it is they include in the income the reimbursement of the real estate taxes. They do not include in the expenses the real estate tax expense. And then they use a higher cap rate with the effective tax rate of, I can actually go to because I have it, 1.0226. So you have to deduct that from their cap rate to get to a market cap rate. They're using a higher cap rate in the denominator versus including the real estate tax expense in the NOI number at the numerator.
So for the department, following up directly on that, the real estate tax isn't considered an expense. I know mortgage payments aren't. Principal and interest.
Correct. So the expenses, because we're trying to determine what the taxes are going to be for properties, we do not include taxes, real estate taxes, in the expenses. And that's canceled out by the loaded cap rate. And income, when we're looking at revenue, we want to know what the base is, okay, the base rate. And on top of that, owners are being reimbursed for real estate taxes, for CAM, insurance, other items also.
All right, so, and again, I'm rusty, I haven't been on the board for 3 years, so I'm going on muscle memory. So the key is that real estate taxes are, the payment of real estate taxes by owners is accounted for in the higher than otherwise, the higher cap rate, in this case, 6.2, and the appellant is calculated without it would be 5.2, but also, and this is for all of us, the appellant's position is that it shouldn't start at 5.2 because that's lower than anything in the county for several years. So the 6.2 in the appellant's position, including the real estate tax offset, should be something higher than 6.25, not 6.2. Should be up in the 6.75 or something range, right, appellant, Ms. Waters?
Yes, it should be higher, and also in this case, it should account for the credit of the tenant. Because if you were going to sell this property with this lease in place, you would get dinged for the credit of the tenant.
Okay, that's for us. Good, thank you. Thank you both.
Okay, any other questions from board members? No? Okay, Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Thank you. Okay, I'd just like to remind the board on page 4, when you take a look at their GPI, it increases from year to year from 2016 to 2019. Additionally, I want to make note that our NOI is less than the 2019 NOI. Also, our cap rate is based on commercial condo sales that have occurred in the county, and our cap rate is loaded. Additionally, I would like to remind you of the sale that has occurred within the subject's building, and like I said, it sold for $3,650,000, and the assessment ratio is 88%. And additionally, when we valued all of the commercial condominiums in this project, we applied the same rental rate, stabilized vacancy, expenses, and cap rate across the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Waters, if you would take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure, thank you. So I did want to clarify one thing. The unit that sold on the 4th floor for that $3.6 million is an owner-occupied unit. It is occupied by a government contractor, and that particular floor has no other access. They have no other commercial above them, and their tenant, their neighboring fellow condominium owner is also a high security, high risk owner. Very, very big on the security for what's going up there without saying too much on a recorded line. I do want to point out that our building has been referred to as a complex, and it is only one of the buildings at Station Square are commercial. There's only one very modest lobby and 2 elevators that serve the commercial space. I also wanted to point out that, yes, we are 100% reimbursed for real estate taxes by the tenant in this case, and we are here to defend our tenant because it also impacts the marketability of the space. I also wanted just to point out that the increases that Lori talked about are due to real estate tax reimbursement increases, not increases in actual base rent.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. It is just among board members, please. Comments? Mr. Matzkin, turn on your microphone, please.
Maybe this was for the department, but you all, I bet, can help me. I've heard twice that there was a 4th floor unit in that building that sold recently for $344 a square foot, but this 2nd floor space is assessed at $522 a square foot. And the department said that the ratio is very low. I didn't hear what the assessed value for that 4th floor unit was, but the sales price was $344. So the assessment is 82% of that, I presume. So how do we get up to 522 for these 2 contiguous units on the 2nd floor? That seems like a huge gap. Did I miss something all?
My notes say that it sold for the 3.6 million at $546 a square foot.
Okay. Is that what it, okay, so I missed something. I don't know where I got the 344. Good. That answers the question. Thank you.
Other questions? Or not questions, I'm sorry.
Comments.
Discussion.
Just one thing. I don't think we've had anything in the past that we combined units to make it just because they're using it or renting it and they consider an office space. I mean, when they're condos, we look at each condo individually, don't we?
Absolutely. Okay. That seemed like a red herring to me and not germane, whereas other points certainly are, typically the cap rate.
Right.
If the RPCs were officially combined, I could see doing that, but they aren't in this case, so I think they're separate. And from a standpoint of equalization, that's how we've treated them.
Unless it was an economic unit.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I will add then, the appellant twice made the case that the tenant's a little bit shaky these days. It's a big tenant, I mean, in this country, and they're shaky, and particularly now with COVID, they're shakier. But I don't see that we're making assessments on current tenants. Cap rate, of course, is all about future value based on today's prices. And I don't think that we should take that into consideration. And nor is it up to us to determine what tenants are stronger or weaker or average or smart or slow. So I don't think we should take that into account when making our final determination. Comments on that?
Well, I agree. I think, if that was the case, I'd be getting tenants with bad credit all the time.
Yeah, we'd be doing credit checks on every tenant for every applicant. So, okay, just wanted to get that out there.
Right, and again, from the standpoint of equalization, we're looking at this based on the 2016, 17, and 18 information. And so, yes, the effect of COVID-19 is probably going to have some bearing next year, but I think we'll be dealing with that next year. So the issue of the cap rate, how's everybody feel about that?
Yeah, it seems kind of low to me, but that's a feeling, and I don't have a large amount of data, and I can't imagine not deferring. I mean, there are studies that the appellant from quality institutions, the appellant cites, talking about higher cap rates. And that, I as always, feel uncomfortable about countering the department's assessment based on their software and their sales, and I got to assume that they have a more intimate knowledge of commercial sales in this county than do larger mid-Atlantic states-oriented assessments or determinations or reviews or investigations of larger areas, meaning, again, Mid-Atlantic region or the state of Virginia. And I feel although, again, my feeling is the cap rate's too low, I couldn't possibly prove that, and I have to defer to the department. That's my commercial real estate hat on.
It's also, Mr. Huffman?
Yeah, Ken, I had the same feeling, and I get it because I understand how the county's got to do bulk appraisals and, you know, come up with a cap rate that they can apply to every property. But I know from actual practice that the lease and the tenant and their credit worthiness is probably the #1 determinant of what the cap rate is on the property, especially with retail. So you end up with probably some really nice bank properties that are net leased for 25 years to, you know, Chase Bank that are the cap rate's probably too high that the county's using. And then you have Gold's Gym, who's in bankruptcy, from what I understand, and they're applying a cap rate that's far too low. So I don't know how we make that more fair across all the properties in the county, especially with retail properties, because you typically have a value based on what an investor is going to pay for a certain type of tenant, right? A Taco Bell net leased is going to trade, you know, relative to what their corporate credit is. A bank or a Gold's Gym is going to trade based on what their corporate credit is, their ability to pay that lease throughout the term. When you get towards the end of the term, you start looking at, okay, well, what's the market value of this space? Not so much based on the lease, but based on, you know, what any tenant that you would expect to take that property would be. So, and I think the Gold's Gym only had like one year left to term anyway. So you kind of have to look at what the sub-market rates are, and you know, it kind of circles back around to maybe when you're on a very long leased property, you look more at the tenant. When you're on a short-term lease, you've got to look more at kind of the average across the county. So, you know, I think I'm rambling on here, but I think they did a good job making an adjustment from, I think they're at 4% or something last year on commercial condos. And this is an improvement. But you know, I'm kind of at a loss for how to be equitable between all the different types of tenants and properties throughout this county without penalizing those that are willing to rent to less creditworthy tenants, if you will.
Mr. Matzkin.
That was great stuff, Greg, and I want to add on to it that this is a particularly unusual property, given that, as the appellant said, and I fully agree, this is pretty much an office space, but guess what? It's being used as a retail space. I mean, Gold's Gym is not an office space. And it is a triple net lease. And most office users, if Gold's Gym disappears tomorrow or next year, are not going to be on a triple net lease. They're going to be in a full service lease, and there's not going to be these reimbursements, primarily for real estate taxes, but CAM and other stuff. And so this gets to be even more complicated, which makes me even more wary of second guessing the department for a broad, well, Greg said it best. Some are undercapitalized, under cap rated, if that's a word. Some are over cap rated, and we got one county, and we're doing mass appraisal just like we do for residences, and we have to make some for equalization case. We have to make some accommodations among the various buildings and their particular tenanted uses. I hope that made some sense.
No, it makes sense. I agree. I mean, and also, I mean, Greg, what you had said, like there's one more year on the lease. We've had some appellants come in and say, oh, well, we only have one more year on the lease, so we want to lower the assessment because of the fact that it is going to come up for renewal, you know, and they may or may not be there. And our argument has always been, well, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. If for some reason, you know, they don't renew this lease, and it goes back to office use, well, then the rents will be different too. So again, I think it's like the cart before the horse to see, you know, what in fact the rents will be, you know, this time next year. And they may be, you know, quite different from what we've got. But I would agree with Ken from a standpoint, I don't see how to change the cap rate. And I mean, based on not having the 2019 information, actually the NOI is understated based on the performance of the 3 years, not taken into account, you know, the potential of what's going to, you know, could happen with this tenant next year. So.
And I'll add next year, if Golds goes away and they return to office, they are going to have a massive tenant improvement allowance and brokers' commissions in front of them. And we'll have to do that. If they come back, we'll have to take a look at that below the line as we normally do. And that would be legitimate. And that would be very sympathetic to the appellant if the department hadn't done that up front.
I would also say, I think, and I was looking for my notes and maybe I handed them in last year or something. So, but I remember there was a professional appraisal that Tom Colucci submitted on this property. And there was a lot of information there on the market and that type of stuff. And I remember we did reduce the assessment to like $430 a square foot or something like that. That's where we got the 2019 values that are in here right now. And I just don't see a lot of movement in prices on these types of retail condos, upward movement from 19 to 20. So I'm kind of like leaning on the fact that we put a lot of thought into this last year. I know we got to rehear the cases every year, but we really dug into it last year and we came up with the value, and just being involved in the market and kind of understanding what's going on. I don't see a huge surge in retail or gym condominium prices from last year to this year. So I can't really see how you would increase the assessment on that basis.
Certainly by 8%, right?
Right, but Greg, I would ask you though, in that logic, and I follow that logic, but when you look at the NOI reported for 16, 17, 18, and then look at the actual, it was higher than what we were anticipating when we made that decision this time last year. Greg, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was just telling somebody I needed to call them back in a few minutes. Yep.
Did you hear my comment?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. Based on what you just said, I mean, I'm looking at the NOI reported for 16, 17, and 18, and you know, when we made that decision a year ago, look at what the actual income for 19 was. I mean, it's far greater than what we anticipated when we reduced it to that.
Follow the trend.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk trends, let's talk what the next deal is going to be for that gym space.
Right, but again, we've already, you know, asked and answered that. That's really not relevant to this assessment and equalizing it with other properties. I mean, I agree with you that this time next year, we're going to have a very different story.
We're getting video.
I'm sorry.
Messages.
Ms. Waters, you can make your comment when it's time to wrap up.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, look, if I was going to buy it a year ago and it was 7.516 million and it had 2 years left of income from Gold's Gym, and then you came to me a year later and said, will you pay 7.516 million and you have 1 year left of income, I don't know that I would value it higher.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I mean, that's just how I would value things. Maybe there's somebody out there who's, you know, money's cheaper a year later, so we'll go and finance the heck out of this thing and pay more. But I'll just tell you where I'm at. I'm looking at 2019. I would freeze it. I wouldn't go any higher than 19. And
Well,
and next year with fresh eyes.
our 19 was low. We did that.
Right.
And do you recall why? Because percentage-wise, it's not an enormous decrease,
No.
but something must have caught your attention.
Yeah, I couldn't find it on the notes.
Mm-hmm.
Which, now this is slightly off, but that's one of the reasons we tried last year. At the end, after the vote, we gave a very clear statement of why we did something, and we were asking that be presented in this when the BO does make a change. So we did have something of what our reasoning was.
That's a great point. Ms. Roskin, can you tell us? Can you unmute yourself?
The BOE minutes should be in the packet that you request, Mark. We put the minutes in the packet.
I didn't see that.
We looked at that, remembering that what your request was. Sorry, the camera's not on. We remembered your request and we put the minutes in the packet. You all increased the cap rate to 6.25% last year. That's why the value dropped. It wasn't based off a per square foot rate. It was the change to 6.25%, which we are using now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That almost gave me the answer. If the board felt comfortable enough to up it, and I assume it was 1/4 of a point last year, based on our discussion, especially Greg's, about the length of the lease and the shakiness and whatnot, that I would feel comfortable bumping this one up for this property. And it addresses some cap rates for some properties are too low, some are too high. I would feel comfortable bumping up this cap rate this time for this appellant by the 1/4 point, and then whatever the reduction of the assessment would be, all other things staying equal.
Okay, I just want to interject one thing here, and I'm not saying not to do it. However, when you come before the board, it opens up the whole case. When you look at now the operating income and you look at the track record that we've got,
is lower.
16, 17, 18, and how the actual assessment is understated by quite a bit. If you bump the cap rate to 6.5 off of column E, which is the actual, you end up with a higher value.
No, we do have 2019 numbers also. They provided an income and expenses.
That's what I'm saying. And so if you change the cap rate to 6.5 and use the actual 19 numbers, which is in line with what the performance has been so far, the value actually increases from what the county's asking.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you that, the 625 seems low, but when you're looking at an NOI far below what's been achieved and what's been reported for last year, I just don't see room for a change.
The NOI is low.
I agree.
What's been reported, Mary, or any of you, by the appellant? I have G1 and G2. What is the?
They just essentially use, by just doing basic math, they use the number under E of just the office retail. Which again is too low.
I agree.
You're getting comfortable, aren't you, getting with the assessment? Okay.
Yeah.
This is a tricky one.
Yeah, no, it is a tricky one. But again, that being said, I just think, for the understated NOI, and the low. I mean, that simple test of using the higher NOI and a higher cap rate, it doesn't justify any reduction. Okay, Ms. Waters, I'm going to tell you for the second and final time, it's just among the board, and you don't get any more chance to present any more information. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion?
No.
Okay, I'm going to move to confirm the county's tax assessment at $8,135,000.
I'll second.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mary Dooley, second by Jose. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so no. Ken and Greg. So it's 4-2. So the motion carries. The assessment's confirmed at $8,135,000 for that parcel. Okay. Moving to the next RPC, and again, Ms. Waters, please, no audio, no visuals. You know, when you're done talking, you're done talking. Thank you. The next RPC is 18014-332, 1220 North Fillmore, Suite 210. Ms. Waters.
All right, so this is the other half of the gold space. This is, or not even a half, a portion. So this is a small piece of it under the same lease. The county has assessed it at $1.8 million. We're saying it's $1.3 million. I will point out that Bush Construction, the developer, manages these tenants and these leases and does not charge a management fee. The only management fee here is the imputed management fee from management of the condominium. So that is why the NOI compared to the county with their percentages used is lower. So if I talk about page page 4, where the Ine Summary, I once again point out that the base rent on here, these are triple net leases as we've discussed on the other RPC, and the base rent is only about, I can't even say numbers. It is below 30. So we're using a 43, and we're including reimbursements here. The county's using $43 a square foot as their base. The increases over time, the assessment since 2016 has actually increased 30%. Across the board here at Station Square. And I would implore the county to look at treating owner-occupied condominiums and investment leased out condominiums separately, because an owner will pay a much higher price, as we saw on the 4th floor, for control and for use of certain spaces. With that, I mean, my comments are what we said in the prior one. I will let Mr. DeCamp or Mr. Viola take the floor.
And it seems to me that, and I'm going to have to review the columns myself, but it seems like the increase in NOI 2016, 17, 18 to 19, one of the key drivers of the increase was the increase in assessment, and therefore the increased pass-through of increased taxes. The rents go up a de minimis amount. You know, it's like a 2%. The tax is the big drive. That's the big annual increase that's probably flowing through on your numbers, although I am not as familiar with them as you all are in terms of how you keep score. But Mary, I was just thinking as you were making your comments that this may explain the question you were trying to get to the answer, to get to the bottom of.
My only other comment is that, as we all know, last year, the county reached for a 50% increase. And candidly, my sentiment about this is they got beat back to about an 8. So now every year they're going for an 8 until they get their 50. And by every year, they're going to chip away and try to get us for another 8% increase. And as David said, we only see 2% increase in our revenues from the increased rents. You know, the taxes, whatever if you increase them, you're compounding it to increase us the next year by increasing our expenses. That makes no sense.
It's certainly not increasing value, except to the county.
Okay.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yep, it is a vicious cycle. And we're done.
Okay, thank you. All right, Ms. Ruskin? Ms. Ruskin, can you unmute your microphone, please?
My apologies. This is just like the last case. I wanted to point out that, once again, we only compare commercial condominium to other commercial condominium projects. But I will say that when we looked at the rents in the subjects market, I also looked at what else is going on in that neighborhood. Okay, so we're talking the neighborhood that is within a couple blocks of the Metro, Clarendon Metro Station. And the retail and restaurant rents in that general area, you know, within a few blocks, run between $48 and $54 a square foot. For office, it ranges between $28 and $32 a square foot. For the PCC class code 219, which is mixed office and commercial, that's analyzed separately, those rents range between $43 and $61 a square foot. So when you take a look at the rent that we are using in our assessment, it tends to be to the low side of those numbers that I just presented to you. And I'm talking about, these are rents that are within a couple blocks of the Clarendon Metro Station. We're not talking Ballston, we're not talking about Courthouse or anywhere else, within Clarendon Metro Station. Once again, we equalize the entire building, so we're applying the same rental rate, the same stabilized vacancy, expenses, and the capitalization rate to the subject as we are with the other units in the property. I also want to remind you of that sale that is within the subject building. It sold for $3.6 million, and the price per square foot for that is $546 a square feet. In addition, its assessment ratio is 88%. And keep in mind, we valued it the same way as we did, all the units were valued equitably. If Irving, my supervisor, would like to chime in and add anything else, he's welcome to. Otherwise, I'm done.
He had to leave the chat.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right, thank you, Ms. Ruskin. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman, unmute your microphone. There you go.
Yeah, I just had the, you mentioned the different rent ranges. Is this, because this is separate condominium unit from the other one that we just saw, but it's the same tenant. Is this a retail use right now, but it's probably more likely to be an office use in the future, similar to the other one? Is this traditional retail space, or is this more like office space converted to retail? Ms. Roskin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking the appellant. It's being used as retail. It could be office, going back and forth. Its current use is retail.
Okay, but you use the $43 based on retail or mixed use office and commercial, the lower end of the range that you gave for the submarket?
Yeah, that's a comparison. Those are other properties that are outside of the commercial condominiums.
Okay, I got it now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Matzkin. Can you unmute your microphone, please?
I didn't know I muted myself, sorry. For 2020, you assume a $43 a square foot triple net because it's a retail space. But in 2019, if I read this correctly, column E, it was $31.40 plus pass-throughs. Which becomes $41.20. Just seems like a big difference. But I guess the GPI is so similar. All right, maybe just hearing myself, I answered my own question. I get it, never mind, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Hoffman.
This might be a dumb one. Why would the per square foot price be different on this unit than on unit 200? Is there any one's better than the other?
Are you asking the county?
I'll ask the county, yeah. If she can't answer, then I'll ask Ms. Waters.
Can you restate what you're asking me?
We've got a assessment of $523 per square foot on unit 210, and unit 200 was only $467 per square foot. So I'm just curious why it's different on a per square foot basis.
They should, they have all been equalized. I'm not sure. Maybe, are you using a different net leasable area?
That could be it. Oh, you know what? That's right. I'm using the...
Mine are all the same. I'm looking at my sheet.
Yes, thank you. No, that's it. That was the reason. I got different numbers.
Okay. Any last questions from board members?
I only had one question about the net leasable area to Ms. Baskin. Where was the difference from the previous years to this year? I noticed that it's lower now.
Okay, we did not change it. We did not change the net leasable area. So for commercial condominiums, we are required to go by what is recorded in the declaration. And the appellant has calculated their net leasable area based on whatever measure. I'm not sure what it is not to say that it's wrong, but the county is required to go by what is recorded in the declaration.
Okay, thank you.
Right, but just to follow up on that, Mr. Penranda, Ms. Roskin, in column D, why does the net leasable area, why is it a reduced number? I mean, when you do the math, you did base it on a smaller square footage.
Versus what they are reporting?
No, I think the question was, I mean, it was originally 3870 square feet, which is what you used in the test, but you didn't use that in the original assessment. I believe that's the question Mr. Penranda is asking.
The original assessment, I'm using 3588. Let me take.
Right, but I would assume that every other year, you use 3870. So what?
No. So
I'm looking at your sheet, so I'm confused if you're saying no.
My apologies. So in columns A, B, and C, and column E, I put in the net leasable area that was reported on the income and expense statement. In column D, the net leasable area is what we used to value the property. Columns G1 and G2 is what the appellant is using for a net leasable area. Does that make sense?
Yes. Then why didn't you use the 3588 in the test?
There is no test.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're right. I'm looking at the operating income.
Okay. I was confused.
All right, Mr. Metzgen.
I have a question for the appellant that she wrote in the last case and stated in this case that there's a lesser management fee than would otherwise be attached to this space because Bush is just doing it as a part of their holdings or something. correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand that and I appreciate it, and I don't know what the normal fee would be, whether it would affect stuff or significantly or not. But if there was that additional fee, then it would, that amount of money will make up, it doesn't matter, $100, doesn't matter what it is added to the GPI, gross potential income, and then deducted as an expense. So that amount, in my mind, just cancels itself out in order to get to the NOI. What, am I missing something?
You're missing that the county uses a full service rent per square foot. So they're using that $43 per square foot. That $43 is full service, and they are matching it with a 20% expense rate. And that normal 20% would include a management fee. And in the appraisal from last year, the management fee on this particular property additional would be additional 5% of income. So in this case, yes, it would wash for us since we're having a triple net lease. But when you try to break down our pieces and compare it to the county, you have to keep in mind, yes, we are paying out less expenses, but we're still doing the work economically. And if we went to sell this, the buyer would definitely have a management fee in there.
We did at one time go out and get a price. You know, we talked to JBG and at that time Smith and also Ackridge. The number was $125,000 plus a portion of a property manager. So we do it for $18,000 a year.
At the condo level, you'd still have the condo, and that's for the 60,000.
Answers my question before that I thought I had answered to myself. For 2020, it's a full service, and for 2019, it's a net lease. So my question to the department is, why are you changing your calculations, knowing that the EGI is lower for 2020? Why aren't you being consistent on, you know, like you were in 2016, 17, and 18, and just using the net lease amount? Which, by the way, is pretty low, $31.40 for that neighborhood.
So are you asking about the expenses?
I'm asking about the income. Why is it for 2020, your assessment a full service lease of 43 versus all other years, a net lease of $31.50 a square foot or so?
So to equalize, we were looking at other properties. We looked at commercial condominium project, and we do have some that are renting higher than the rent that we used, okay, without disclosing that information, whatever that is. There are others that are reporting a higher rent in commercial condominiums. And then once again, to check that, to you know, make sure, are we in line, especially for this area, which is next to the Clarendon Metro. We looked at other rents of the freestanding restaurants, retail, office, the mixed use ones, and what is being obtained in that area within a few blocks. And we're on the low side.
I agree. I mean, there's a full service retail rent, but of course, they're second floor retail. They're not nearly as valuable as the restaurants next door to the right or left, north or south.
Right. It's a mixed, because we do understand that this is mixed. It has both office and retail. And so we're looking at it as if it was mixed.
Okay, thank you.
Blended, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay, any final questions from board members? Okay, Ms. Roskin, if you take a minute to wrap up your case, please.
Thank you. Once again, I just want to remind you of the sale that has occurred in the subject building at $546 a square feet, and referencing page 4, which is the summary page. Please keep in mind that the actual revenue is, you want to exclude the pass-through, take a look at the revenue. It is increasing year after year at roughly 2.4% or 2.5%, but it is increasing. We used higher expenses than what they're reporting, substantially higher than what they are reporting. Take a look at our NOI. It's much less than what is being reported from even back in 2016 all the way to 2019. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Waters, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Sure. I just want to point out that these two spaces together are over 20,000 square feet of space. So comparing it to a 3 or a 5,000 square foot first floor restaurant, and as Mr. Lars, as one of the board members pointed out, this is second floor space.
Well, one other thing I'd like you folks to, Ken might remember this, back when we did this project, we had to get the Gold's Gym off the site. So we gave him a sweetheart deal at $18 a foot. And it's a long-term, you know, so we do that, we couldn't decide. We did. So now we're still stuck with that, right? So we're at $28 now from 18, but they've been in the space since 06. So that's why it's so low. It's not like we're asleep at the wheel and are pushing rents.
Okay, thank you. Alrighty, it's just among board members. Where is everybody? Go ahead.
Let us discuss the last statement they made. This is a sweetheart deal, clearly priced for very good business reasons, below the market at the time. But of course, there's a large, automatic, well-known quality tenant 15 years ago, 12 years ago in the space, so maybe they deserved a break. I'm positing that we can't price this. I don't know, maybe I don't know. Their income for good business reasons, non-family members and all of that, like we do in residential, their income's lower than it might have been for, again, reasons that made sense at the time. Do we want to accommodate for that lower income? But of course, both in this RPC and the one that we just made a determination on, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, as at least last time I was on the board, we often said, and their income is absolutely lower for for quality reasons. Can anybody respond to that? Does anybody care about that, or are we just doing mass appraisal? This is pretty much what stuff spends for, leases for in this immediate neighborhood. Which, by the way, I agree with the department. It is lower. What they put in is lower than quality first floor space immediately nearby. So they have offset to some extent that it's second floor and a sweetheart deal. And maybe I'm forming my question better for us now. Do we think that it's low enough? The department has put in their figure low enough to accommodate these two combined spaces, two RPCs. I'm going to dig a hole deeper if I keep talking.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I'm not sure what your first question even was. You lost me in that. However, you know, when you look again, just like you said, the numbers are the numbers. And when you look at the actual assessment, I mean, you had asked about why they used a higher amount, but they're looking at gross potential, and then they adjusted for vacancy. The expenses are much higher than what's being reported, and the NOI is much lower than what's been reported for 3 years. And especially, you know, when you look in 4 year and add in 2019. So to answer your second question, which I did understand, I think the numbers do address that sweetheart deal and lower income on the property. Mr. Hoffman.
Looking at the rationale that the department used, a mixed office and commercial market rent on the low end of $43, but then use the cap rate for commercial condos. I'm just curious why they didn't use the cap rate for general commercial properties, because that's what I would have valued it at. So, and when I do that, it brings it down a little bit. I don't know if I have any support for that, but I would look at that $43 kind of submarket rent that the department is using. When you subtract expenses, maybe you're at maybe it's $9 in expenses, you're at 34 net. At a 7% cap rate, you're right about where we were in 2019. Pretty close to it. So, I mean, that's my feeling on how I would handicap this property.
And I would assume that the board did exactly for this parcel what it did with the adjacent parcel last year and bump up the cap rate by 25 basis points, thereby bringing down the department's initial assessment, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just to respond to Greg, you know, I can see the differential between the cap rate and then using the higher rent. But when you look at it, when you look at that NOI is not in line with what it's actually performing at. I mean, even if you took on an average the 3 years and threw out the higher one for 2019, and you took an average of that and used a 7% cap rate, you're at a higher value than what the county's assessed it at the $1,876,000. So I mean, I agree with the logic to test it different ways, but I don't think you can test it and then say, oh, well, it's under assessed based on, you know, the NOI, you know, what they use when you look at the actual performance of the property. I don't think you can take that NOI that they used in the test and then use a 7% cap rate on it. It was just my thought, but Mr. Penaranda,
I just did tests like that too, and it does come up higher.
I think it's the same as the previous case. You know, we're looking at numbers that were reported. We're looking at NOIs that are there, and these are being treated the same as, you know, any other condominium that we'd be looking at. If it was all general commercial, it would be different, but they are condos. You know, it's like we've seen before. You know, when an apartment building is an apartment building, you assess it as an apartment building, but when they are divided as condominium units, then each unit is individually assessed. So I can't really see how we can combine and make changes in that.
agreed.
Well, I think that the one point about the sweetheart deal that they made with Gold's Gym, it's kind of like this is an office building, but it's not an office building because they offered a really cheap rent to Gold's Gym. So I would look at it still as an office building and not say it's a retail property that's underpriced on the retail rent. But that's my opinion.
And based on that, you don't have a value that you could place on that.
$1,742,743.
And that's using the assessments NOI?
That's $43 gross rent minus $9 expenses, so 34 net times 3588 rentable square footage at a 7 cap.
I follow your math, but I think it's too low based on the performance of the reported income. All right, where is everybody else?
Yeah, I think that's a little too low for me.
I voted in the last identical parcel to lower it, and I've heard more information this go around, and I am no longer convinced that I was right being a nay last time and would vote to keep the assessment. Again, a lot based on Mary's assessment of where the NOI is and the current numbers vis-a-vis last year. So I'm switching from an A to an I for this identical situation. That's
Okay, any other last comments? Then I'm going to move to confirm the county at the $1,876,100. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Ken. Ken has a second. Mr. Metzgen, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it is 5-1 without Greg. The county is confirmed at 1,876,100. And moving on to the last case, RPC 1801433, 1220 North Fillmore, Suite 300. Ms. Waters.
All right, so this is the third floor. You walk into one very modest lobby, 2 elevators serving the second, third, and fourth floors. It's a third floor. It is one huge condominium space that is subdivided into different tenant spaces. We have only office uses up here. We have 3 tenants that are third party and 2 owner occupied or related party tenants in this space. The rental square footage totals, we measured via BOMA to give some clarification on the square footage that we're using. So it's the gross number versus the county uses the net number. But it's economically the same effect. If you're using square footage in commercial real estate, depending on how the tenant wants to measure it is how you adjust their base rent. I will say all of these office leases are triple net leases, which is something you don't find very often. I will say that this assessment from 2016 on has increased 30% or over $2 million. Currently, the county has it assessed at $9.9 million. They are using one comp that happened in October on the space up on the 4th floor. The space on the 4th floor is under 7,000 square feet. That deal was not marketed heavily, and it was bought by a government contractor who specifically wanted that space. And now this one comp is being used for this entire condominium. And in this case, you have 20,000 square feet of contiguous space that's operated like an office building, but even though it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, it's being touted as commercial condo. Our argument is on the cap rate, of course. We are not arguing on the NOI. I think the county's full service square footage number, when you take into account the real estate tax numbers that are included and the management fee that it's lacking in ours, you come to a similar amount. When I pull out the real estate tax assessment income and the NOI, and I put in a 3% management fee, a 2 to 2.5% of cash receipts management fee, I get to an NOI of, that's how I got to my NOI of $540,000 on page 4, column G. So in this case, if I take my actual operations for 2019, I back out my real estate tax income, and I put in and deduct a management fee that would be below market, I'm still at $540,000 of NOI. I capped that at a 7.5 cap rate and came up with a valuation of $7.2 million, which if you use our square footage is $345. If you use the county square footage is $380. I will contain or argue that this acts like office, should be considered office, and the fact that the county has one rate for a condominium, whether it's owner occupied, whether it's investment, whether it's retail, whether it's office, whether it's industrial, is short-sighted. And I think that these hearings are the place where you can come and say other reasons in the review process with the county. And the fact that those things are being discarded is disappointing at best. So we are being assessed at a 5.2 cap rate when in the office corridor here, per our appraisal last year, the only, the institutional grade transaction was only at a 6.25 cap rate. So the fact that they think a condominium would, an office space in a condominium would be considered at a lower cap rate is mind-blowing. Mr. Viola, Mr. DeCamp?
So what are we missing? We're about 10,000 square feet on the floors.
Yeah, we have vacancy. Yep. Yep, that's another write-off.
We have a vacancy that occurred in February of last year, about 1,900 square feet, but then that was compounded by the vacating of a tenant who had been with us since '06, CMTA, and that number was, how many square feet, David? 6,000. 6,000.
Yeah, at this point, we have in the write-up that we provided in our Board of Equalization application, we cite the vacancies that we're now looking at that happened in the last quarter or in early 2019, which is reflected in the 2019 results that you have. And also, it's just gotten worse from there. So at this point in the building, even at January 1st, we only had 3 tenants and 2 related party tenants. So we have a huge vacancy at this point.
I will say that the related parties do pay market rents, by the way.
They do.
And they are in there.
Yeah. Anything else, David?
No.
All right, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Roskin?
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, yes, I am mentioning, I am stressing that there is a sale within the subject building. There are other commercial condominium sales throughout the county. And when we base the cap rate, the loaded cap rate at 6.25, we looked at these other sales and they support the 6.25% loaded cap rate. And I want to stress once again the rent that was used for the subject. When we were also looking at rents with inside the condominium, the commercial condominium project of Station Square. We also looked at other competing commercial condominium units that are close by. And then we took a look at what the rent would be, for example, more so for the mixed, the property class code 219, which is mixed office and commercial. We're not applying separate rates when we value those. We're applying one rate, which is a blended rate, okay? So, for example, for this subject, we're using a blended rate for both the office and retail, and we equalize this across all of the units within this particular condominium project. And once again, I just want to stress that we're looking at an NOI that is much lower. We gave them additional expenses much higher than what they are reporting, and that's pretty much it, unless Irving would like to submit his point.
Mr. Bailey?
No, I think Lori covered it very well. It's very similar to the last two cases. If you look at the summary sheet that she provided, as she indicated, our NOI projection is less than what they've been reporting. The cap rate, we made changes from what we had last year, which is in line with what the board decided last year, with the help of the sales that we had. The assessment to sales ratio on the sale in this building was 88%. The price per square foot was at $546 per square foot. And even with the sales that we had for 19, a lot of properties, commercial properties that we had, we actually reduced the commercial condo values based off of those sales. It's just that these properties in the Boston corridor, they're the ones that had a higher assessment to sales, a lower assessment to sales ratio, higher price per square foot, and they saw an increase such as this property.
And he's referring to Clarendon Metro, not Boston.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, questions from board members? Mr. Matzkin. Turn on your microphone, please.
Sorry. It was brought up by the appellant, but it's a question for the department. Why are all commercial condos, regardless of their zoning code or use or anything, all exactly, the cap rate's all exactly the same?
So if we could disseminate that there is a difference, then we would use it like we did last year for the medical versus the other commercial condominiums. We would disseminate that, but this year we're looking at it and we feel that the 6.25 across the board was representative of the commercial condominiums in the county.
Based on sales or rents or
Yes.
what?
Yes, based on the sales and the income and expense data that we have on those sales.
And so your deduction is that condominium properties are more valuable, lower cap rate, than commercial office buildings, retail that are just for lease.
So that's what we've developed from the sales. Like I said, we have sales. We looked at their income and expense statements, and we were able to develop a cap rate off of that.
Condos are more valuable. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ken, if I can address that, and it's also, like Laura said, it's based off the sale, but we're looking at not just the cap rates based off the income we have. We're also looking at the price per square foot, which was brought up quite often last year. And you weren't on the board, but even last year we included these sales in our write-up, Lori did, with the price per square foot, because last year was the first year we went to the income approach. This year's the second year. We made adjustments where we increased the general commercial condo cap rate up based off those sales. Medical condos, those sales came in right around where we had them valued, and therefore we didn't make a change to those medical condos. So if anything, we did have it segregated by use between general commercial condo and medical condo, but due to the sales, we brought that cap rate up for general commercial condos, and now it's in line with the medical condos. And just like we do any other property type, each year we're going to look at the sales that we receive to see if we need to make adjustments to the cap rates based off these properties.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Well,
Any other questions? No, Ms. Roskin, if you would take a minute to wrap up, please.
Thank you. Once again, I just would like you to take a look at the summary page, and recognize that our NOI is less than what they are reporting. We are giving them additional expenses than what they are reporting. And this information is based on the data that we've gathered within the subject project and neighboring commercial condominium projects also. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Waters, if you want to take a minute to wrap up.
I'll wrap it up. David DeCamp speaking, and we're only going to talk about the cap rate. The cap rate issue that they've come up with, it's the loaded cap rate of 6.25, which is really, when you get down to it, an NOI cap rate of 5.25. That's not why cap rates are created. Cap rates are created as what would somebody who was disinterested pay for an income stream, and you'd have to have it backed by like the Federal Reserve or by Google or Microsoft in order to pay at a 5.25 cap rate. None of the tenants up and down the Roslyn-Ballston corridor are of that credit ilk, unless perhaps it's backed by the federal government. So it's an artificially created cap rate, and we just want to get on that that's unfair to our property. But I understand it's a process, and we just have to come up with a better process, is my recommendation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. And I just want to start by saying, Greg, I don't know if you have a thought on this, but based on my tests on the other two, I have a different thought on this one than the other two, so it'd be interesting to hear what you say.
Yeah, I just look at this as a small office building.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just the fact that it's a condo is literally just ownership structure that was created because this is a mixed-use property, and there's no way to have a fee simple ownership of just the office component. So because they came up with that structure, it's a multi-tenant small office building. So I don't see why it should be using a different cap rate than the small office cap.
Right, what I did, thank you. What I did on this was the same logic that I used on the other two cases. And I don't have them all open in front of me, but we basically had pretty stable or increasing NOIs on those other two. On this one, when you look at it though, applying the same logic that I used, on the previous two, you've got income when you look at 16 and then it goes down, then it goes up, then it goes down. So I think even more so is a reason to do a test here and do an average. And when you average the 3-year, leaving out 2019, and doing it in this particular case, and it's the 7%, which is what I used as a cap rate to test on the other two cases, being for general commercial properties, it would cap out at 9,405. If you use the 4-year, including the higher income for 2019, it caps out at 9,431. It's not much of a difference, but I just feel in being fair and equalized, especially with these properties and how we tested it, I think the assessment's a little bit high on this one. So other folks?
Greg, did you run it just as office to see what it comes out?
Yeah, I didn't do the average. If I just using 2019's 665 number, or line 21, operating year NOI at a 7.5 cap, that's 8,873,987.
Okay, how are you getting 7.5? Because I thought we were looking at 7%.
Yeah, I've got the guideline sheet for 2020, and I'm just there's a category, capitalization rates for small office, 1987 and after 7.5, and it goes up as you get older.
Oh, see, I was in the box above you.
Yeah.
Capitalization rate for general commercial properties.
Yeah.
And the difference just in Ken, in the numbers, I mean, if he was using the 665, the average is 660 for 4 years. So it's not that, that number isn't that far off. It's just what would you use as a cap rate for it?
Yeah, I mean, if we went by the office guidelines, 2005 to 2009, Metro, it's 6.65 cap. I think those are a little low for these tiny office properties, because as they were kind of pointing out in the last couple of cases, operating expenses, management, all that stuff is relatively higher on a per square foot basis than in 100,000 square foot office building. So I think that's why we have the guideline for small office at 7.5, and that it's a little bit higher than your traditional big floor plate single-use office building.
So you want to, Greg, so what you're saying is you want to encapsulate this one RPC and not use it as a part of the three floors of commercial office space that this appellant owns as not such a, which is, I don't know, 60,000 square feet or 50-something thousand square feet, which isn't a micro office building, but certainly isn't a big high rise either. I mean, you just, this is it, it's 18,000 square feet, it's small, that's it. We ought to have a higher cap rate significantly.
Yeah, I mean, I've been over there. There's nothing when you walk through that area that screams this is an office property from like a traditional office building. It's a very unique kind of mixed use property. So I think that's why we have these kind of carve out guidelines for general use commercial properties and small office buildings, because you generally get a little bit of a discount on a sale on a property when it doesn't quite fit the box as being, textbook office or textbook retail. So, I mean, the true cap rate's probably somewhere between 7 and 7.5. But I'd lean towards the 7.5. If it's going to kill this thing, you know, and I'm just going to get outvoted, then, you know, I can get on board with closer to a 7.
Me too, 7. Because
Right, 'cause the 7.5 puts it below 2019 and just slightly above 2018. And this property, you know, I'm not saying it's growing in value, but it's certainly not flat 2018.
Mary, where did yours come out?
9,405,600. Jose, can you live with that?
Not really. I'm not in favor of making any changes, to be honest, because I think we're treating this different than the previous 2 cases. And, you know, to me, they're all condominiums. They should be treated equally. So, yeah, I'm not really.
Well, and I would agree with you. However, the same test and the logic that I used to confirm the other 2 is this logic. So I don't want to throw that out the window and just say, oh, the county's right, when if that's the logic that we use to confirm 2 cases, you know, in a test, that's my reason for wanting to make the adjustment to this. I think this one, it's got a far more unstable reported income, and I don't think it is comparable to the other 2. But that's all right. That's why you get a vote.
Right, but I mean, the NOI
office use.
I'm sorry, but the NOI is still lower than what they're reporting for 2019 or the previous years.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm okay with the assessment the way it is.
All right, any other?
Yeah, but Mary, Gogan, your logic before, what I heard you in the last 2 cases was, we'll look at the column D, and the NOI is much lower than what was reported in column E. Mm-hmm. And that was your basis. Here, of course, is exactly the same situation, but your analysis is different. What did I miss?
No, the analysis is the same. What I did in the other instances to do just a test against them was I took the 2016, 17, 18 income average that came out with it and used a higher cap rate.
That's what I missed. Okay, good.
And then I also did it for a 4-year average, and it basically came out higher than what the county was assessing it. In this instance, because of the instability of the NOI being reported, it actually comes out lower.
Yeah, less. Yeah, you said it.
So I don't feel we can discount that, you know, just to say that the county's right. If that's the logic that I used on the other 2, I think they should have the benefit of the same logic for me. You know, so Mr. Yates, where are you on this?
Yeah, I don't see bringing it down to strictly just straight as office. I'm closer to where you are, but I think it is high. I applied the same one, same as we did.
All right, Greg, can you live with that? All right, then I'm going to make a motion to reduce the assessment on this property to $9,405,600. And that is based on using the 3-year average of income at a 7% cap rate. Do I have a second? Okay, got Mary, Julie, and Greg for a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Jose? Okay, it's 4-1. The assessment is reduced for this RPC to $9,405,600.
Thank you, board. Have a great day.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Do we have any more business today?
We do not. So does anybody else have anything? And we've got other folks still on the line, so.
No.
Okay, all right, then we will see This meeting will adjourn, and we will re-adjourn tomorrow morning, July 1st at 9 a.m.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.